Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. Together we dive into the world of sci-fi and science fiction. From episodes of Star Trek, Star Wars, to The Walking Dead, Resident Evil, all the hot new science fiction movies from the back doors of Marvel or DC. The Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. You'll never look at science fiction the same way again.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Sci-Fi Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Alex. This week, you guys, I have been binging so much sci-fi, mostly on Netflix, but also I've been sorting through it a little bit on Amazon Prime. I have some friends who come over to my house quite a lot, and they tend to not like sci-fi. So finding sci-fi that everyone can enjoy can really be a challenge sometimes. I don't like a lot of things that my friends like either. They want me to watch that Gwyneth Paltrow Goop thing on there. Not into it. But they don't like the things that I like either. So fair. Finding something in between can be difficult sometimes, but I want to talk a little bit today about what these different, they're not networks, but what these different programs really offer. And we're also going to talk a little bit about Star Trek and Travelers, because hey, it's Groundhog Day. Well, it was Groundhog Day. So, with Netflix, I added Tremors to my list at the beginning of January, just because I like watching it again. And when I did that, it gave me such a crazy list. So I have a whole segment of my Netflix that just says, because you added Tremors to your list. Adding that one film put all kinds of crazy stuff on here, which I'm excited to watch. Most of them I'm excited to watch. I don't know if I need to watch Ghost Rider again, but it added The Matrix Reloaded, Doom Annihilation, Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines, Apollo 18. I'm not familiar with that one as much as I am Apollo 13, but I'm going to check that one out too. More Matrix, Godzilla, Cloverfield. It has given me a really good mix of new and old sci-fi, including The Time Machine, and one of my all-time favorites, Evolution, with David Duchovny and Julianne Moore and Orlando Jones. That movie cracks me up. But my friend who comes over here and doesn't like sci-fi also doesn't like David Duchovny. So that knocks out a lot of my choices. But in addition to all of these other things, it also put Tremors 2 through 5 on here and Tremors A Cold Day in Hell. So I'm very excited to check all of those out. It has a really wide variety, I think, of speculative fiction that is added based off of just adding Tremors. So I really encourage you guys to add Tremors to your list on Netflix and see what kind of cool things you get. There's also some that look very much horror based, or at least psychological thrillers like Await Further Instructions. I was hoping Pandorum would be on here, but I think I have it on DVD somewhere. It's one of my favorite psychological thriller sci-fis. But it has The Rift as well, The Dark Side of the Moon. And it has, what's my other one? I watched it the other night while I was going to sleep. Event Horizon. Yes, with Sam Neill. Love Sam Neill. So there are a whole bunch of cool new sci-fi things they put up there, including some of the Back to the Future movies. So I know I'm going to be binging for a while. And if you guys are also down for a binge of sci-fi and speculative fiction in general, they have a lot of really good movies on here. There's actually a lot of really popular ones here as well. For Amazon Prime, I was very interested to see what all they had on there. I was able to get my friend to watch The Commuter. She enjoyed Black Mirror, so she was also willing to watch Philip K. Dick's Android's Dream of Electric Sheep. But I tried to find RoboCop on there because I'm like, okay, she'll watch RoboCop. It's more action-y. I was looking for that one and Demolition Man, and I couldn't find them on either one. But Amazon Prime does have a special, I don't know, it's a documentary. They refer to it as a video essay, but it is the hidden meaning in RoboCop 2. So I did add that to my list. I'm going to be watching that later because I am very interested in the symbolism in these stories and, you know, just weird things like the hidden meaning in RoboCop. RoboCop and Jaws. And my third one was Return of the Jedi. Those were my 3 favorite movies when I was about 4 years old. And I watched them until the tapes were just so stressed out. So I'm very excited for this RoboCop 2, The Hidden Meaning, because I have normally watched that through the eyes of a child. And I would like to learn some more about it. I had some RoboCop comic books growing up too, so this should be intriguing. They also have a lot of short stories on here that I really enjoy. It's a pretty cool concept now that Amazon Prime tends to do a lot more than the other programs for the streaming services. I like that they are able to give us these little light chunks of stories. So things that might otherwise be bite-sized and would never get to see the screen. They do show that on here by like doing these collections. So the Philip K. Dick collection tends to be, you know, about an hour long. I think The Commuter was about 50 minutes. Maybe longer than that. That might have just been the point when I was getting sleepy. But some of them are a lot longer than others, but that's the fun thing about streaming services now is that they don't have to adhere to that 44 minutes so that you can have 16 minutes of commercials. So I've been watching a lot of it on there. They have some more Sam Neill movies on there too. The Triangle is on there, so that's been added to my list. Highlander, the original movie. They have a lot of Highlander on Amazon if you also want to pay to rent them. But Highlander with Sean Connery and Christopher Lambert is on Prime right now, like included with Prime. And so is Orphan Black. At least the first season of Orphan Black. Nope, seasons 1 through 5. Perfect. If you've not seen Orphan Black, I encourage you to check it out. It is super cool, and Tatiana Maslany does such an amazing job playing so many different characters. Like, it's mind-boggling how well she does all of that, and they each have their own personalities. It's nuts, like, their own expressions. I know she's an actress, and that's what they're supposed to be doing, but playing against yourself the whole time for an entire series is pretty remarkable. I know Lindsay Lohan did it as a child for Freaky Friday. Not Freaky Friday. For, The Parent Trap. There you go. The Parent Trap. But still, it's just, Tatiana Maslany is a whole nother level in it. Definitely check it out. The other thing I really like about Prime when I'm looking for movies is that not only do they have more of like sci-fi documentary type things and these little chopped up stories, but they also have a lot of monster movies. I'm not a big horror fan per se in speculative fiction, but if I am going to watch horror, it's generally a psychological thriller type, or it's going to be a monster movie. So they have crazy looking monster movies on here, and one of them on my list is The Velociter. After losing his parents, a priest travels to China where he inherits a mysterious ability that allows him to turn into a dinosaur. At first horrified by his new power, a prostitute convinces him to use it to fight crime and ninjas. So I am very intrigued by this concept. It has 4 stars, 323 ratings on here, 4 stars. IMDb only gave it 5.5. But, you know, I don't really care what, you know, Rotten Tomatoes and all of those other groups have to say. I just really love monster movies. And a lot of them do tend to be cheesy. But if you're interested in, like, really weird monster movies, they have Velociter on there. They also have A Quiet Place. I don't know if that counts as a monster movie. There are creatures, but we don't get to see much of them, I don't think. And they also have a documentary style thing right now. It's only 50 minutes long called H.R. Geiger Revealed. and it's just about his life and work. So I think it's really cool because it has rare footage and interviews with him and some of the rock gods that he's worked with. So you get some really interesting, rare looks at, how he created monsters and everything for his works. I think it's super cool. They have a lot of surrealism in there too. So if you are a fan of surrealist artwork, then you might want to check that out as well. They also have the Jodorowsky constellation on there. So I'm very excited to check that out. It is a bunch of, little bite-sized stories. It's only 85 minutes total. This came out in 1994. And it has a whole bunch of different pieces of information about him. And Jodorowsky himself is in it, Marcel Marceau as well. So Peter Gabriel is in it as well. There are just a lot of really cool things in the Amazon collection right now that you can't find on the other networks. But I think overall Netflix tends to have more of the big name ones, unless you're looking for TV shows like Stargate. So Stargate Atlantis is on there right now in the US, all 5 seasons. And they tend to frequently have Stargate on there. Of course, there's also, the new season of The Expanse to look for that as well. And they have the original series of Star Trek on there. We're going to go on a quick break. And when we come back, we are going to talk about Travelers.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now. Don't bother. What's hot on Netflix and everything in between. That's gsmcpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back. In our last segment, we were talking about the different elements of sci-fi you can find on streaming services like Netflix versus Amazon Prime. At least in my personal experience, my algorithm is finely tuned at this point, although it did oddly say that Travelers or Dark Matter was only 91% aligned with what I watch. I thought that was interesting considering I've watched both of those through multiple times. You would think it would be 100%, but I'm guessing that it instead just doesn't have elements of the other movies I watch on there. Like when I can't sleep, a lot of times I'll either watch Event Horizon or I will watch a Diane Keaton movie, which is not sci-fi. First Wives Club is not sci-fi, and neither is Something's Gotta Give, but they have Keanu Reeves and Jack Nicholson in them, and they're really good. So I don't know if that counts for why it's giving me only a 91% for that. But that's my best guess. So, now I want to talk a little bit about Travelers. Travelers is a Netflix show. It lasted 3 seasons. And on the one hand, I'm bummed that it didn't get to continue more on Netflix. But on the other, that's when Netflix tends to wrap them anyway. And they did a really good job with the ending of it. Brad Wright is who created Travelers and came up with the concept for it and created the show. He has also worked on Stargate. So the TV show SG-1, Brad Wright and Robert Cooper really brought that to TV for us. And that is why I started watching Travelers to begin with. I've told you guys before that I like to follow the occupations of the different directors and actors and producers that I have loved over the years. If I enjoy your work in one thing, I'm going to bump it up my list for another one. I was actually watching the Magicians the other day, behind the scenes video, and Dan Shea is in it. Dan Shea was also in Stargate, and he was originally Richard Dean Anderson's stunt double when he was on MacGyver and stuff, and so he came with him to Stargate and is now the head stunt coordinator for the Magicians. So I'm really excited to see how this is really playing out for all my Stargate people. They've gone all different directions now, but they're still all making amazing art. I wish there was more Stargate, but we instead get more awesome stuff like Travelers. Different awesome, still awesome. So in Travelers, oh goodness. So the whole premise of Travelers by Brad Wright is that people 100 years in the future who work for this computer entity go into the past and try to change things to, create better eventualities in the future. However, the way that they do this is by studying people in the past from their Facebook profiles, from obituaries, etc., and find out the exact time and date that these people died. They learn as much as they can from social media and other forms of media about their lives, and then they send the consciousness of someone in the future into the body of a person in the past right as they're dying. Now, the ethics in this are somewhat dubious. On the one hand, they aren't killing these people. They are just taking over their bodies when they die. But on the other hand, they have the ability to prevent these deaths in some ways, and yet they do nothing. So it's very interesting that way. I really enjoy a good story that has, ethical questions, and Travelers definitely does. In Travelers, they follow the protocols, which are similar to like the directives, like the Prime Directive in Star Trek. But with the Travelers protocols, they have a couple of main ones. So they have Protocol Alpha, which is their Prime Directive, and that requires all Travelers to do whatever it takes to resolve the issue they're currently assigned to. Protocol 1 is your mission comes first. That means you have to cast aside all other priorities from the task at hand. You put your assigned mission first, and anything else just goes sideways. It doesn't matter really if, it's somebody else's life or anything like that. It just, your teammates and your mission come first. Protocol 2 is never jeopardize your cover. So you have to leave the future in the past, is a quote that they say frequently. Now, in this TV show, we follow a particular traveler group, and 2 of them had been in a relationship in the future, but when they get sent into the past, the guy is married to another lady, and the girl the woman is having this difficult situation where she's a single mom, and so she has a child that she has to care for as well. And throughout the show, sometimes they get enough information, and sometimes they don't get all of the information that they need, because they're trying to glean it from information that can only be acquired via the media or social media. So if you think about your social media presence and the things that you leave out, or the things that you do put in, or the things that you might choose to show a certain type of way to the rest of the world, your public persona, those are the kind of issues that they're facing here as well. So for Protocol 2 and not jeopardizing your cover, if you were dating in the future, you can't bring that with you when you go into the past. You have to maintain your cover and your new life in the past. You cannot use future knowledge for personal gain, so no playing the lottery. That would jeopardize your cover. If you suddenly won, it would put you in the limelight. And you can't call each other by your future names. You are now your new person. Now, Protocol 3 is don't take a life, don't save a life unless otherwise directed. Do not interfere with the way the rest of the world is going on. That's not what you're there for. You don't know how changing something like that in the past can really affect the future. And we often see in the show that other traveler groups are sent back And they're like, okay, hey, you have new orders now. Now you have to do this. You did this thing, and now it's caused this problem, so we have to go and fix this. Protocol 4 is do not reproduce. That can massively interfere with the mission. Protocol 5, in the absence of direction, maintain your host life. So if you have no other directions, just make sure that you keep the body that you have in good health and don't do anything to put your host in danger. Not because they care about the host inherently, but because nothing else, you need to be present and ready and capable to perform your mission. Protocol 6 is no inter-team or deep web communication except in extreme emergencies or when sanctioned. So they have to do a lot of communication with each other, but you're not supposed to be doing anything that could perhaps be detected. And then Protocol Omega means the director, the computer program that is sending the information back, will no longer be intervening in that timeline. So if you are part of the Traveler program and Protocol Omega is initiated, then you're just free to live out the rest of your days as you see fit. It can be enacted only because the grand plan has succeeded and everyone's on an optimal path to a better future, or because there's no possible way of saving the future that this computer called the director has really determined. So it's very fascinating as to how these principles guide the team, and just like Star Trek, the ones that different team members choose to break for certain reasons, and a lot of those reasons tend to be related to not getting the correct information or not getting the full picture prior to being sent back. And sometimes things just go sideways. I really enjoy Travelers because it's not quite a Groundhog Day trope. It is a time travel thing, but there also is a time travel Groundhog Day episode within Travelers itself. So everyone is time traveling back in time in this, and then other people are traveling back to fix other things that you might have changed, or additional missions that are parallel or perpendicular to yours. And then you also have all these other problems going on. Like one of the characters doesn't know that before he comes back, or before he travels back in time, he does not know that his host was addicted to heroin. The family did not want that in the news. So, you know, a lot of times obituaries are just written by family members. You get to choose what goes in that. So it's a little bit flawed in some ways how they're getting this information, but they're doing the best that they can. So one of them comes back in a heroin-addicted body because the cause of death, I think they listed it as a heart attack, but I think it was technically a heroin overdose. And then there are other bizarre things that are happening to each of these characters. One gets sent back and he's a teenager, and it's like, oh no, what now? I have a curfew. This is not ideal. All of the ethics and finding out what can go wrong is a lot of the fun in Travelers. A lot of time travel movies and TV shows, they're just like, oh yeah, you know, here are the things that could go wrong, and there's always kind of a threat that it could happen. But in Travelers, a lot of times things do go wrong, and it cannot be changed to be prevented in the same way that a lot of other shows rely on. So just fixing the past is not always available to them, and sometimes they're stuck with the decisions that they make because the director doesn't think that it's important enough to change it. So they have these really crappy situations with other people, and it's a lot of fun to see. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the Groundhog Day episode of Travelers.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back. In our last segment, we were talking about the TV show Travelers and its basic premise. Now I want to talk a little bit about the Groundhog Day episode. You guys know that Groundhog Day episodes are some of my favorites. I recently did a Groundhog Day episode top 5 list, I believe. I think it was 5. And I also mentioned some honorable mentions. So shows like Russian Doll were on there. Travelers is definitely also on there. So not only is it a time travel show, but it also has specific elements of Groundhog Day. So, since Groundhog Day is this week in real life, I want to talk about Travelers. So, they have this episode, Season 2, Episode 7. It's called 17 Minutes. One of the reasons I really enjoy this episode is they're essentially living the same 17 minutes over and over again. Most Groundhog Day episodes, it's like you're living the same day over. Usually they'll give you like 12 to 24 hours of living this over and over again to really give you a broad look at their total day. But for this episode, it's literally just 17 minutes. That is all that they get to fix this. So, the premise of this episode is that Grant, who is the leader of the team of travelers, and he is played by Eric McCormick, so Will and Grace fans. He is doing some awesome sci-fi for us right now. And he is very serious in this role, though. Grant's a very serious guy. He's not as fun as Will, but he is endearing in his own way. And I love Eric McCormick. Grant calls the team, and they get a new mission from their director. So they have to go out and start a new mission, and they're very excited about this. They pack up a little inflatable motorboat, change into clothing that's appropriate for this mission, and drive out into the mountains. We only know that there's a time of impact of an object in 23 minutes and 6 seconds. We don't know if it is a plane or a meteor or what. So they're just going to prevent this object from impacting. As the team loads the boat into a trailer and gear in their car, Grant is like, oh yeah, today is mine and Catherine's 10-year anniversary. And he does not know what that really means. He just kind of mentions it in passing to the team, and he's not aware of relationship standards for the past. However, the others do know, and they start razzing him, of course. And they're like, you messed up, man. You are screwed. And it's pretty funny. But, you know, he's the most serious of all of them. So Grant really is, he's just a workhorse. He's very dedicated to his job and everything. So he wasn't as aware of the other minutia that might go into building a relationship with people in the past. Now, he has no self-service out in the wilderness, though, so he doesn't get his annoyed past wife's phone call, and so she just keeps getting angrier. And then Philip tells Grant to get Catherine something made of tin for their anniversary, because it's their 10th anniversary, so that metal for that one is tin. If you've watched New Girl, you know, Tinfinity. And then they go ahead and start getting to the lake. Once they're at the lake, they go to put their boat in the water, and they're still bantering about Grant's anniversary. That does take up quite a bit of the episode. But as far as the mission's concerned, like, they get around to talking about what they're there to do. And we find out that the object that is impacting in their area is going to be a meteorite. And that meteorite is important not just because it's going to impact the area, but that it is also composed of this really rare mineral that's super important in the future. It's like rare, it's a super precious one, and it's going to land in that lake that they're at. So their job's not really to prevent the meteorite from causing damage per se. They're just there to collect this mineral. So Trevor starts the motor on the boat, and then a bunch of people come up out of the water in black scuba gear and start shooting. Like, before they can really react, they just open fire on them and kill every single member of the team super fast. Now, that all happens in like the first 17 minutes. And then, since these are time travelers we're talking about, death is not necessarily permanent in all instances. So the rest of the episode is just them continually going back, the reset to that 17 minutes, and seeing what's going on there. So the director in the future is going, crap, that's how it went in the past. Now what can we do to fix this? What are all of the eventualities that we could try? So they try to send a skydiving team back, and that did not really work out for them. Then they go ahead and, they contact another team, and they say, hey, we have less than 60 seconds before signal loss. Can you get to those coordinates to save them in 17 minutes? Because they're important to continue on in their mission for the director. Although a lot of times travelers do end up being expendable to the director, provided that the director has more volunteers for them. Now, the agent's like, I can get there, but I can't get there in 17 minutes. Best I can do is 25 to 30 minutes. And then Traveler 5001 is transferred into the body of a skydiving character, and then they get 17 minutes before the team gets massacred again. Now, they just keep sending them back and keep doing this over and over again, and it keeps trying different scenarios. Now, remember, the director's like a computer, so it doesn't really care about how this plays out for a lot of them. Its only mission is to see through the grand plan. So these people just keep dying over and over again in terrible ways, and things just keep going bad for all of the characters. Wakefield keeps trying to get to the team, and they pretty much determine that there's this other group in the future called the Faction who are fighting the director, and they are trying to probably steal that meteorite to prevent the director. Now, we don't know why that they're doing that at this point, but it's very interesting that they've changed the frame of the show from just being the team of travelers against whatever's going wrong in the past, and the director being with them in whatever's going wrong with the past, to it being about, hey, we're trying to fix this future, but not everyone in the future wants this particular future. Not everyone's on board with this plan, which I think is how it would really go in real life. We can't agree on anything in global politics as it is. We can't even agree on anything in American politics right now at the actual government level. So who's to say that there are not multiple factions that would be causing difficulty here? But for the sake of simplicity, Travelers really keeps it to one main faction who is kind of fighting against the director. So they think that the faction is who's sending these people to steal that meteorite and to prevent the director from even existing. So they just keep coming back, but they're kind of realizing what's going on, but the team has no idea each time they die that they recently died. But that's going to be a big problem because they can't change any of their behavior. So it's Wakefield and Carrie on the outside trying to fix it for them. And they try running out and screaming, get back in the water, or get back from the water, and it is just not working. One of them, someone gets defeated by a dog in one of the attempts, and it just keeps going over and over. One of them, Carrie, the one who's being sent in skydiving, manages to land safely and says the future's at stake, but then she can't get off the landing field before she collapses. So that one's just real quick. And each time that this happens, it pops up on the screen, mission fail, and it tells you the names of the travelers or their designation number, 5001, 5004, etc. And then status, retry. And then it gives you a number to let you know where you are in that sequence. And it says sequence initiated, traveler 5005. So it just keeps going on, and it's really fun the way that they tell it. It's not a funny episode per se, but from just a sheer sci-fi perspective, I really enjoy seeing all the different ways it plays out. And that's something else that I just enjoy about these Groundhog Day episodes, really, is that they can tend to be a lot of fun, but my favorites are often the more serious ones. And this one is definitely played for drama and to give us a better understanding of what's going on in the future without ever showing us the future. We just have the director sending these people back in time over and over again to try to prevent what's happening with this other traveler group that is imperative to resolving the issues that the director is trying to prevent. So they're imperative to the grand plan, and it's just pretty cool how they do that without ever showing the future. I really enjoy that, they talk about the future sometimes, but we never get to really see it in the show. And it's fascinating how they represent that as they go along. I love good show don't tell television, but this is just like on a whole nother level where they're kind of showing it to us with their emotions and stuff, and with the director, traveler teams fighting against essentially what are traveler teams for the faction, but without showing it to us. We just go, oh, okay, we get it from how they're speaking to each other that this is what's going on, but a lot of it you're picking it up on your own without it really being expositional. It's truly art. I highly recommend watching Travelers if you have not seen it. I won't tell you how the time loop episode ends, but it is very intriguing, and I highly encourage you guys to watch it. We're going to go on another break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Star Trek.
Watching TV has changed over time. Streaming has become the new norm. That's why Golden State Media Concepts television podcast dives headfirst to the world of cord cutting. Want to be on the loop of what's hot in Netflix? Or if it's not a preference, what about original shows in Hulu? We've got you covered. Join us as we fill in the blank and talk about movies to stream and what show you should be binging. This is the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast.
Welcome back. In our last segment, we were talking about Travelers, specifically season 2, episode 7, 17 minutes, where they do their Groundhog Day time looping. Another one we're going to talk about now is going to be Star Trek The Next Generation. So Star Trek The Next Generation is one of my favorite TV shows of all time. I once spent 3 years while I worked in tech support watching every single Star Trek in order. It was a long, long journey for me. Longer than coming back from the Delta Quadrant. Almost. Not really, though. And it was a lot of watching. And sometimes, you get a bunch of those holodeck episodes in a row or a bunch of Barclay episodes, and you're just like, oh no, not again. But even then, by powering through, I learned to love them. So today we're going to talk about some of my love for that. We're not going to go into Star Trek Picard, so you do not have to worry about that. I'm not going to give you any spoilers for it. I'm going to wait until a couple of episodes are out before I jump in there with it. But we are going to talk a little bit about Star Trek in general, and also the episode Cause and Effect, which I briefly touched on in a previous podcast. Now, Star Trek, The Next Generation, of course, is one of my favorites because it has Picard in it. Everyone loves Picard. I don't know anyone who does not love him. If you do, I would be very interested to hear your reasoning for it. And you can reach out to me at the GSMC SciFi account on Twitter to really, talk it out. I don't understand how someone could not like Picard, but I'm sure that there is someone out there, statistically speaking, who would have their reasons. Now, for Star Trek Cause and Effect. This is the episode that predates the movie Groundhog Day. So if you saw the Super Bowl commercial yesterday that had Bill Murray in it, and it was a Groundhog Day episode because the Super Bowl came out on Groundhog Day, then you might be familiar with the trope. So on Groundhog Day, Bill Murray is this news anchor who is a huge jerk, and he goes back in time, like 24 hours at a time, because he's just a bad person and he's meant to be learning a lesson. So he just keeps getting his day reset, really similar to Monday in the X-Files. And he only has a certain amount of time to do this. But he does not have an actual mission. He doesn't know why he's being sent back in time or why he's looping, really. 'Cause he's not really necessarily being sent back in time. It's more of just a Russian doll situation, but instead of it being triggered by him dying, it is just, he's going to experience this day and go from there. And he starts out just not really paying any attention to it, not working hard, and then he really starts trying to make a difference and figuring out what's going on with him. With Cause and Effect, this came out almost a full year before the Bill Murray movie. So a lot of times we call these time loop episodes Groundhog Day episodes, colloquially. But technically, the Star Trek Cause and Effect one came first. So in Cause and Effect, this one was written by Brannon Braga, and it was directed by Jonathan Frakes, who plays Riker. I really enjoyed that about this. This is later on in season 5. It's towards the end of season 5. And the Enterprise gets destroyed near a distortion in the space-time continuum. And then they get a temporal causality loop because of how they've essentially, been blown up near that space-time continuum distortion. And it puts the crew and the ship back in time and forces them to relive the events that led to the explosion of the ship over and over again. And this is in the Enterprise D. So, the issue with it is the starboard warp nacelle is having some problems because it's been impacted, and now there is a lot of damage to it. The casualty reports start flooding in, the ship systems start failing. Riker tells everyone to get to the escape pods, and Geordi is just doing his absolute best to shut down the warp engines. He is doing what Geordi does best, and that is solve crises related to engineering. And then the nacelle completely blows out. The Enterprise starts spinning, and Data's like, oh no, our engine shutdown has failed, but in data form, so less emotion than that. And then they are like, oh no, warp core breach, which is like one of the go-tos for Star Trek. And Picard orders all hands to abandon ship, but it's too late, and the Enterprise explodes, and everybody dies. Now they get sent back in time, and they have to do this all over again. It's, we come back from the break, and they are, traveling at impulse speed through space. It's intact and undamaged, and we're over here like, what? What is happening? And it's like, oh yeah, there used to be commercial breaks. So the commercial break allowed it to cut from that and then come back and go, okay, well, everybody's fine. They're playing poker. It's the one where Dr. Crusher is really excited because she's winning the hand. And it's her, Data, Riker, and Worf playing poker. And Data's shuffling because, he's an android and he's very fast. So he's almost like one of the machines at a casino. And also the most trustworthy. So he is randomizing the deck. Riker and Worf are like, I don't know if you're really making it random or not. They're, just participating in playful banter. But, Dr. Crusher ends up winning when she calls Riker's bluff and has to go down to sick bay for work. And Geordi's like, I'm dizzy. And he gets examined, and then she gives him a hypo spray. And she's like, I kind of feel like I've done this before. So in this case, these characters are getting a sense of deja vu. That didn't happen in Travelers, 17 Minutes. But in Cause and Effect, that she starts kind of getting an inkling that she's done this before. Then they go ahead and, there's another commercial break. because you explode, and then the commercial break, and then resets again after the commercial break. And Data's shuffling the cards very fast. Again, Riker and Worf are like, are you really randomizing the deck? And Crusher again wins. So everything plays out exactly as before, but this time Riker is starting to feel the deja vu as well. And he looks over at Dr. Crusher and folds, saying that she was going to call his bluff. And then she's like, what? How did you know? And he's like, I just had a feeling. And then Dr. Crusher has to go to sickbay to treat Geordi and is, really starting to feel creeped out. The warp nacelle explodes again, and then we start back over. So they're all playing a game of poker again, and they are questioning Data again. And this time Worf starts picking up on it and is like, this feels like the Klingon equivalent of deja vu. And Riker's like, yeah, it's because we do this like every Tuesday. And Worf's like, no. This is different. Dr. Crusher gets the same feeling. And then she starts predicting the cards that come next. Then they start really getting overwhelmed by feelings of deja vu. And Data looks into the computer in main engineering, and he sees that there are a bunch of voices in there, all coming from the crew of the Enterprise. So things progress, and they keep trying to, just go forward. They know that something's going to happen, but not necessarily about the distortion yet. They just are able to predict it maybe a little bit ahead of time, like the cards and everything. And then Worf's like, we need to reverse to avoid the disaster. But Riker's like, maybe reversing course could cause the disaster. And they just start overthinking it way too hard while they're trying to figure out what to do. And I don't know. It's really cool. They call Red Alert a lot. It's also just fun to watch the Enterprise get blown up a lot without having to worry about it being permanent in any way. I really enjoy that about time loop episodes, really, because they give you a safe way to confront these possibilities. In anthropology, we call it rituals of rebellion. Not this particular issue, but rituals that are performed so that, things that would otherwise be problematic in society are not so problematic. So it's like when we do the White House correspondent dinners roast, where they go in and they roast the president and the politicians, but also the White House correspondents. And it's meant to mediate tension between the media who cover the White House and the people who work at the White House and on Capitol Hill as politicians. So it's trying to release some of that tension so that it's not playing out in the news all the time. Now, whether that is actually working, who's to say? But that's a good example of rituals of rebellion in our present day. And in the case of these sci-fi shows, I always inevitably think of rituals of rebellion. Even though we aren't really rebelling in this case, it's just showing us something that would otherwise make us very upset. If they ended a show by just killing all of your favorite characters, that would be so upsetting. Watching any of your favorite characters die can always be really upsetting. But in this case, it's just happening over and over again. And sometimes they play it for laughs. Sometimes they don't in time loop episodes. And this one, not played for laughs, but it's a lot of fun. And I really enjoy how we get to experience that, but in a way that feels low stakes. So it can help us process some more types of emotions. And that's really what Star Trek does, is it helps present everyday issues in modern life and our own sociocultural and sociopolitical issues in a way that is more palatable. It's a little bit softened, and that way it allows us to watch it from a detached perspective. So I really enjoy that about sci-fi in general, but especially about Star Trek, and particularly about time loop episodes.
The GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. In our last segment, we were talking about Star Trek The Next Generation and how it was the progenitor of the Groundhog Day trope from its episode Cause and Effect that actually predated the movie Groundhog Day with Bill Murray. Now we're going to talk about a timey-wimey episode of Star Trek Voyager. So you guys know that Picard and Janeway are my top favorite starship captains. So I'm going to include Janeway too. Now this episode in Voyager is really interesting to me. It's episode 15 from season 3 and it's called Coda because it's partly a time loop episode, but we find that it's not necessarily time that's being reset in this situation. In the episode, Janeway and Chakotay are on an away mission from Voyager in a shuttlecraft, which is, really interesting that you sent your captain and your first officer out on a shuttlecraft on an away mission. But, they left somebody in charge. It'll be fine. And they are just chatting away about a talent show they had on board the ship when they get forced down to the planet by an electrical interference. Now, they are harmed in the crash, Janeway critically so. Chakotay gives her CPR and a shot to revive her, a hypospray, and then Janeway activates the homing beacon. Unfortunately, the Vidians, they are also present in the area, and if you remember, they are the ones who, take people's organs and stuff. They are the ones who actually shot them down. What they originally thought was electrical interference from a nearby planet, they find is interference by the Vidians actually shooting them. So when she sends up the homing signal, it doesn't go just to Voyager. It also goes to the Vidians who come down to try to harvest their organs. Then when they get down there, they are captured by the Vidians. Janeway is strangled to death. Chakotay is shot. Then Janeway wakes up and finds herself back on the shuttle, again talking about the talent show. And she and Chakotay both realize that they're reliving an event again. And then they're like, maybe we're caught in some kind of time loop, so they're somewhat aware of it this first go around. And so they try to turn the ship and search for the Vidian ships on an intercept course. That way they think that they can avoid it this time. But unfortunately, the warp core starts having some problems and the shuttlecraft explodes. Theoretically, they died in that crash because, they just blew their bodies apart and also into space. We don't see the aftermath of that really, but we do see Janeway and Chakotay again waking up in the shuttle. Or not waking up, but just being conscious of the fact that they're in the shuttle having this conversation about the talent show. And they look real freaked out about it. Then we come back and we see that they are seeing the Vidian ships on an intercept course, but this time they can contact Voyager. So Janeway tries to disrupt the time loop using tachyon energy, and the ships disappear. But Voyager is able to bring them back safe and sound. However, Janeway starts describing what happened, but not even Chakotay remembers the time loop this time. So he remembered it the first time, but he doesn't, and he looked freaked out the second time, but now that they're back on Voyager, he seems to not remember it. So the doctor scans her and finds that she's been infected by that Vidian phage. And so he promises to continue looking to a cure for her. He quarantines her And then she wakes up and sees, the gross things on her skin that indicates that she is indeed infected by the phage. The doctor thinks that, this virus is pretty aggressive because she just went to sleep and woke up and already has it. So he decides to humanely euthanize her with nerve gas, despite her yelling that she does not want to be euthanized at this point. It's very dark and grim, and it violates, what we understand of doctors, which is first, do no harm. So she's freaked out and gets euthanized, but then she and Chakotay are conscious again on the shuttle, that is. And they see a bright light coming towards them, and it looks like it's going to totally engulf them. Now she is having an out-of-body experience on the planet, and Chakotay is trying to give her CPR again and give her the hypo spray to revive her. So she's like having an out-of-body experience, and Chakotay seems to be not aware of anything wonky at all in that regard. He doesn't realize that she's like a spirit form next to him. So then the crew members arrive again, transported to sickbay, and Spirit, Janeway, the only one that can really talk in the situation, gets, behind them. She follows them. She tries to talk to the crew, and they can't. So the doctor tries to revive her, also can't. Janeway tries to contact Kes with her telepathic abilities, but is not quite successful. Janeway then sees the spirit of her late father, who was a vice admiral in Starfleet. So her dad tries to convince her to come over to the next world, is what he's referring to. And he's like, you died on that shuttlecraft. You need to come with me. I also tried to hang on way longer than I should have after I was in my accident. And I just thought I could return home to, you and your mom for a long time until he finally realized that he couldn't. So the concept here is that if your death is unexpected, then you may linger on a while. Just like the concept of ghosts. It's like unfinished business because you weren't ready to go. If you have, a prolonged illness and you know that death is coming up, then people think that you can really prepare for that. That's at least the concept they're discussing here. You can have those last conversations with your loved ones and such. You can say your goodbyes, but when it's unexpected, then it results in ghosts because you have this unfinished business. So, since she had an accidental death, an unexpected death, her consciousness is like hanging on. But Janeway is not entirely convinced. You know that she was a scientist before she was in command, and she's super skeptical. She has a very healthy dose of skepticism. And she's like, if you're a hallucination, you would know everything that I know anyway. So you would already know these things about me. And he's like, well, that doesn't really matter. Eventually you're going to cross over to the other side and you're going to, move your consciousness along. Your crew members are looking for you, but they're going to give up. And they're trying to bring you back, but they're not going to be able to. So you need to just let go and move on. And it's coming from like this place of compassion, seemingly, from her father and empathy. But she remains very skeptical. So she wants to try to get Kes to sense her again. And it shows Kes and Tuvok meditating to try to be able to see Janeway, but Kes can't get anything. And now she's just like, man, maybe I imagined that anyway. And she's like, I must have just really wanted her to not be dead. And that's really, I just convinced myself that I did feel her. So in that manner, Tuvok's like, that does seem to be the most logical explanation. And, we've tried for 3 days to try to find her and everything. It's probably time that we accept her death. And so then Janeway gets to watch her own eulogy, and she cries a little bit actually when Harry's delivering the eulogy, but she never promotes Harry. So I don't know what happened there. He's just Ensign Kim for forever. So she can make new officers out of Maquis people, but she's not going to promote Harry, which I think is one of the funniest things in the entire series. Poor Harry worked hard. He really should have gotten that promotion. And let's face it, Janeway was not, skittish at all about violating the temporal prime directive. Janeway does what Janeway wants. But I think the normal day-to-day minutia of just, giving out promotions on our 70-year journey back to Earth kind of slipped her mind. Poor Harry's just always an ensign. So she cries at watching her memorial service, but like in that stoic Janeway way. And her dad is there with her, and she watches B'Elanna also give her a eulogy, and everybody talks about what she meant to them and what she taught them, and it's very sweet. And you get to see the other characters comforting each other, and there's like a really wholesome masculinity with Tom Paris like calming down his best bro, Ensign Kim, and it's adorable watching them try to comfort each other and to see, the other character interactions as they're bonding over what would be very heart-wrenching for them. And they've lost not just their friend, but the captain is their leader. She's their great hope that they're going to actually get home from the Delta Quadrant. So it's pretty cool all the way around. And then Chakotay ends the service by giving her a moment of silence and launching her pod into space, and then says that, they should essentially hold awake for her because she won't want them to be sad. And that totally checks out, given, Janeway's whole Irish heritage thing. Wild Irish rose she is. So they keep going at this, and the alien being who is masquerading as Janeway's father is revealed to be as such. And she's just like, I don't abandon ship. I don't believe you. You are an alien. And the alien is like, yeah, you're right. I'm an alien. And has been claiming that its species comes to help people who are dying to understand things. And then just keeps peeling it back until we find that the alien is trying to make her go with it. But it can't. She has to voluntarily go. So Janeway's like, oh, you can't make me do anything I don't want to do. And if you can't make me go with you physically, I'm not going to volunteer. So, screw you. And I'm going to go back to where I was. I'm not going to just give up and die. So at this point, they find that the alien has been trying to feed off of her life force. But in order to do so, it has to convince her to let go of everything. So, kind of like how in Supernatural, in order for angels to take over a vessel, they have to have permission. But in this case, it's just this creature trying to drag her off to, the other side to eat her. And Chakotay likens it to like a spider having to lure a fly to its web. So overall, I think it was a really interesting episode. This is also one that's shippy a little bit because she gets to spend all this time with Chakotay. And then at the end of the episode, they go have a bottle of champagne during a moonlight sail on Lake George. On the holodeck, of course. And it's super cute. I really like this episode. It's super dark in a lot of ways, though, because you just keep seeing Janeway dying in all these different ways. And Chakotay, too. But I think there's just something so perversely intimate about seeing someone strangled to death and, like, the light leave their eyes. It's super dark. And it's a lot more personal in a way than just shooting someone. And that's typically how we see people die in Star Trek, is being shot by a phaser or, a disruptor or whatever the type of technology happens to be, depending on which species is shooting whom. And then we also see, Borg assimilation and explosions. Those tend to be the main ones. But the part where she's strangled, I'm just like, whoa, dude, that is super dark. But also, I really enjoyed how they told that story and how as time goes on, they just keep getting more freaked out and then things change to where we realize that maybe Chakotay isn't in on this at all. Maybe he's not actually conscious and present with her because he is reacting the way that she is, but he doesn't remember when he gets to Voyager. So it's really cool. I like how they kind of twisted this theme, and it was a lot of fun. All right, we're going to go on a quick break. Stay tuned.
the Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Travel Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Talking about kind of a time-looping episode of Star Trek Voyager. Technically, there was no time travel in it, but it had all of the appearance of a time loop, which was a fun double whammy of an episode. So now I want to talk about another favorite, Eureka. If you guys remember Eureka, it ran around the time that Stargate and Stargate Atlantis did. And there is an episode where they have a time loop called I Do Over. It is season 3, episode 4. And it's the one where Allison and Stark are supposed to get married. Now, I particularly love Eureka because Sally Richardson Whitfield is in it. And she is an amazing director in her own right now, as we discussed in the episode about Amanda Tapping. So she also played Teal'c's wife, Drayok, in Stargate at one point. There were actually 2 different people who played Teal'c's wife, but Sally Richardson Whitfield also did an amazing job, and it was really cool to see her in this before she started really doing mostly directing. So in this episode, Allison and Stark are getting married, and Carter, who is the sheriff of this town full of, really, really smart people. It's a town full of geniuses, like the offspring of Einstein and such. And they cause a lot of problems. So they need just like this regular Joe Blow sheriff to, round them up and to, just wrangle them in general. He mostly is like herding cats for most of the series. Not really trying to prevent them from doing their experiments, but just minimizing the damage that they're doing. So Carter is bummed because he is in love with Allison. And so Allison is marrying Nathan and he's sad. But his sister Lexi is also visiting. So this episode opens with Jack getting in the shower, and he is blasted with cold water by his house, which is, kind of conscious. Her name is Sarah. And she's like, you have high levels of adrenaline, and you should calm down. He also is out of body soap. He cuts himself shaving. He is just having an overall bad day already at the beginning of this episode. He wants to look good for the wedding. The house makes fun of him for it. And, his daughter also starts teasing him. And then his sister shows up 3 days early. It is just a hot mess of a day for Carter. And he spills ketchup on his last clean uniform. So he's like, great, I have to have this. I just have to walk around like this right now. And Carter also agreed to walk the woman he loves down the aisle on her wedding day, which is really twisted for him to be doing and for her to have even asked. I have a lot of ethical problems with that, but neither here nor there. But anyway, Jack just kind of goes throughout his day. His name is Jack Carter, which is another reason why I like it, because of Stargate, because I'm a shipper. So he's going through his day and is just having such a long, awful day. And Allison is having, just a regular day and is like, oh, this isn't that bad. I've been married before. I know I can deal with all this. But Carter's like, no, this should be a really big deal for you. Like, even if you've been married before, this is still, it's a big day. It's a momentous occasion. And, Jack gets called in to work, to do work things. Because a lot of times when Jack is at work, he's just walking around talking to people in Eureka. For the most part, it's a chill town. There aren't a ton of bad guys per se. There's just a lot of shenanigans that can blow up on like a huge scale. So Jack goes into the hallway, and there is a man who is, really upset. And Jack interrupts Stark and Fargo making a time-sensitive delivery, and they ask directions to the last guy on the list. Stark's like, don't be late. Bring the necklace I got Allison. And, heads off. So he's having more of a rough day because Jack gets shot with a blue light, and it's just like, it's just really wearing on him because his sister is trying to let his teenage daughter, who has been in trouble off and on, especially before she moved to Eureka when they were living in California, she's trying to let her try champagne. And he's like, I really don't need my previously delinquent daughter drinking champagne. This is not the direction I'm trying to coax her in. And it just keeps snowballing. And it gets to the part where the pastor says, speak now or forever hold your peace. And the light flashes, and Jack is back in that terrible cold shower at the beginning of the day. Everything happens the same as before. He gets teased by the house. He's out of soap. He gets ketchup on himself. The works. His sister is over there causing mayhem as well. And we go along. We learn more about Jack. We learn about his sister and his family. So that is a lot of fun because for the most part, we just have Carter and Zoe. And we learn a little bit about Zoe's mom at some points. But having a sister in town is fun. Not for Jack, but for the viewer. It's a lot of fun. So when he tries to tell Allison, though, that he's having deja vu, because like the Star Trek episodes of time loops that we discussed today, he is recognizing that something's kind of wrong. He says it, and Allison is not really convinced. And she's like, stop wasting my time. This is a busy day for me. It's not a big deal, but it's a busy day. And instead of Stark and Fargo delivering something that day, they're waiting for a delivery. And Jack's like, is it possible to get stuck in a time loop? And Stark's like, nah, you'd be deleted from time and space. And so it just keeps going on back and forth. Jack kisses Allison, though, which is like a big no-no if you're walking her down the aisle. Hello. And then she's like, I love Stark. You're just a friend. And he's like, okay, I'll still be there for you. Which is so twisted in a lot of ways. But morality of the issue aside, he just goes throughout his day. The wedding bells begin, and, speak now, forever hold your peace. Jack's flashback into the shower, and before he leaves, reminds his sister and his daughter about the legal drinking age. So he's remembering exactly what's happening. And this time we find out that there's an atomic clock creating a time loop. And Jack's like, Stark, please do not plug the clock in until after the wedding. But Stark's like, we only have a certain time frame to do this in today, and that is before the wedding. Otherwise, we can't try it again until the year 2036. So Jack's like, no, you really need to not do this. But Stark doesn't believe him. No one really believes him, and it just keeps getting worse and worse until we finally get to the point that Jack just kind of is going about his day like normal, and he starts kind of paying attention to the things that have been said to him repeatedly as time has been looped for him. And he's like, wait a minute, why is this guy being fired? And it turns out the atomic clock does the same job that he does, but they don't have to pay him healthcare for it, which is a really interesting commentary, I think, on the socio-cultural process that we're undergoing now with industrialization and increasing mechanization of jobs. So Leo outright says, hey, it does my job, but you don't have to pay healthcare for it, so I'm getting the boot. Over time, Carter kind of figures out that what's going on is Leo has made a particle decelerator to try to cause one light to travel slower than the speed of light, and has beamed himself with it to make sure that he's kind of existing outside of time. Unfortunately, Jack also got hit by it, so that's why Jack is experiencing the loop as well. Very similar to in Stargate, how In Window of Opportunity, that guy was trying to go back in time and, you know, spend time with his wife who was dying of cancer because he couldn't stop her cancer, but he could see her again. And Jack and Teal'c were the only ones who were affected by that machine aside from that guy. So Jack's like, okay, you know, I forgive you. Just fix it. And Leo's like, I don't know how to fix it. So he has to go and try to convince Stark to help fix it because Nathan Stark is like one of the smartest people in this town. And to do that, he has to memorize some equations because since it's a time loop, you can't write it down. So just like Window of Opportunity, the character who is not considered to be the most intelligent in that group has to do some, you know, memory stuff to seem smart. And, you know, they kind of learn stuff along the way too. They do the same thing with 3 in Dark Matter in his time loop episode where he is, you know, more the brawn of the outfit. He's not really the brains of it. And he has to memorize some stuff. So Jack has to go and figure it out. And Leo tries to fix it in the particle decelerator. And he only has a couple of more times before the universe rips apart. But the timing's off. Jack finds himself back in the shower. And Leo has been crispified by the decelerator. By crispified, I just mean like it literally burnt him like Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru style. It's just a crispy corpse at that point. So then Jack and Stark try to recite Leo's formula in a song to remember it. And Stark is just really not convinced. And Allison's like, we have a problem. And they go to remove Leo's remains from the time maintenance room. And Stark's like, I believe you. Just keep it quiet from Allison. You know, she's freaking out about the wedding. Really, I don't want to, you know, upset her. I'll help you figure it out, though. And they go to fix it later, Jack and Stark and Fargo, and they connect the cables. But this is the last time that they can do this. And if we don't get it right this time, then they can't do it again, or it's going to rip the universe apart because Leo, you know, messed up that last run of their last 2 runs. So Stark's like, you know, if something happens to me, take care of Allison. And he connects the cables, pushes the button on the decelerator, and time moves on. And it doesn't crispify Stark like it did Leo, but he did stay inside that chamber too long, and he kind of disintegrates. And it's so heart-wrenching, and it leaves Jack having to tell the woman he loves on her wedding day that the man of her dreams, the man that she loved, is dead. And at that point, Nathan and Stark had gotten to the point where they were pretty much friends. So it's just heart-wrenching all around, and the episode is just so sad, and everybody's mourning Nathan. And the thing is, I didn't really like Nathan when I first started. He's really arrogant, but a lot like Han Solo, Nathan Stark really grows on you as you watch the show. And you will have to watch it yourself if you've not seen it. I mean, it was out in 2008, so I didn't think those were really spoilers. But if you haven't seen it, you'll have to watch it and see if, since it is a sci-fi show, if they're able to bring Nathan back. That is all I really have for you guys today. Thank you for hanging out with me while we talked about more Groundhog Day stuff. Truly one of my favorite tropes. I mean, just messing with time in general, there are so many possibilities, and each of these shows do it a little bit differently, and I like to see how they are similar and different in their approaches. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Sci-Fi Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show, and writing a nice review always really helps us. Also, if you could please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you kindly, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.